Welcome to another episode of our parenting series called The Growing Parent, a platform where we navigate being parents of preschoolers. Today's episode is going to be a bit different, but still just as interesting. I want us to discuss the intersections between culture and diet. For most people, food is cultural and may not necessarily be nutritional, or is it? A plant or an animal that's suitable to eat in one society may not be suitable for another. But let's explore this today, because one of the most important things to remember in connection with cultural factors involved in food habits is that many combinations of food could result in nutritional results too. So to help me dig deeper into this conversation is Whati and Lindiwe Whati. I am Oluwethu Leshabane. Welcome to The Growing Parent, and thank you for joining me. Thank you so much, Keke, and thank you, Lindiwe, for joining us today. I appreciate you guys being here.
My pleasure.
It's a pleasure.
My pleasure.
So I'll start with you, Lindiwe, because you're our expert here today. So in the South African context, how would you say we define culture?
Culture, regardless of where you are, is really about what people believe in, what informs their decisions, and at the end, their behaviors. And the similarities in the way that they do things then becomes defined as their group's culture or that community's culture. So wherever there's similarities between a group of people, that is their culture.
And when we talk food and culture, and we talk nutrition and culture, within our South African context, do these things tend to clash?
Well, sometimes they do. So let's give an example of multi-generational families. You know, there's families where there is a baby, there is the parents, there is sometimes the sister of the wife or the mom, there is the mother, and then there's the grandmother. Under those circumstances, what you're gonna find is that it is literally a village raising a child. And decisions around what a child eats will not just be determined by the one parent or the two parents. It will be the grandmother's influence. And also it will inform actually what they even buy. So who has the power to buy actually determines what happens in that household. So yes, in that respect, there may be a clash when for the primary caregiver, their thoughts and their beliefs and their actions go against what other people in the household believe in. However, sometimes they are not clashing because, certain things like having that extra community for support, it can only be positive if it's done in the right way. So when we have to talk about culture and nutrition, we have to look at what's working and what is not working, and change that throughout all those generations.
Absolutely. So I'll come to you, Keke. You and I are very similar in that we have toddlers. And we take them to granny's house, we will take them to an aunt's house. We then also have nannies, right, in our homes, and they have their own way of doing things. So we really grow up in a generation that there's so many multicultural facets to how we're raising our children. And it's hard to dictate what the child is eating when they're at granny's house. So how do you navigate that? And what does it look like when it comes to the diet in your home?
Okay, so in my home, we've got a very balanced diet. However, I do know because my son is literally the only grandchild. So he gets spoiled irregardless, and he's got a way with his grandmother. My mom's been waiting to have a grandchild for a lot of years now, and for one of us as her kids to actually have a child, it did a shift, man. I've seen my mom's softer side through him. For me, growing up and knowing the kind of parent my mom was, and then seeing her now as a grandmother, it's two totally different things. So as much as I would come into play and be like, you know what, Mom, I prefer him eating A, B, C, D, as opposed to 1, 2, 3, 4. She's got a thing of mixing, e.g., oats with maybe like a little bit of wheat bix, because her understanding of, the nutrients and nutritional values of those two. And watching him eat it actually when he's with his grandmother as opposed to when he's with me, it's two different parenting styles, and I'm like, you are a different child. You cannot be my son. You know, they manipulate you. And I'm able to get away with it with auntie because a parent, obviously, like, you know, your nanny goes according to the rules that are engaged in your household. As opposed to granny feels like, you know what, I've done this so many times. I've got all your brothers and sisters that are here. You are all healthy and alive. There is no way I do not know how to raise a child. So when it comes to granny, you know, there's a little push and pull, but at the end of the day, there's a balance. There really honestly is a balance.
Yeah, and I mean, when it comes to also having a partner who's completely different
Yeah.
from you, who comes from a different culture as well, what dynamic does that play in food in the home? Being married to a baby man, I know, you know, I knew for sure Papa is going to be a staple in this house.
Yeah.
And that it's going to be a lot of starch, right, within the meals that we're going to be serving. But it's a constant negotiating to be like, maybe not every day. maybe not like this particular kind of starch every single day or every week. Let's switch it up. Let's change things around. But how do we have these conversations when I'm fine, I'm okay?
My son's very comfortable with pap every day. I'm not. But hey.
You know, it's very interesting because, look, at the end of the day, we need to embrace our culture.
Yeah.
There are no bad foods. There is nothing wrong with pap. There's
Really?
nothing wrong with rice. There's nothing wrong with pasta. There's nothing wrong with amadumbe. There's nothing wrong with samp. There is nothing wrong with the foods that we grew up having. It's the quantity, it's how, with every food. So number one, definitely variety. 100% agree with you. We need to make sure that it's not the same thing every single day. But let's not, for lack of a better word, demonize certain foods. And sometimes it has to do with the association. We think that people are a certain way, or maybe even associating with poverty. I know of people who like, I do not want to see cabbage again in my life because I had it every single day. The cabbage has done nothing wrong. It is a good vegetable, easy to plant, easy to grow anyway. The most important thing is don't kill it. It shouldn't become red. Just steam it a little bit and you enjoy it. So I think psychologically we need to embrace the foods that we all grew up eating and finding space for it and appreciating the nutrition they provide. So just to give an example, you look at something like sorghum. We know it as mabela. There is the coarser, there's the finer one, there's even the whole grain. They are a starch, but they are not processed as much as certain things that we may find from the shop shelves. So we should be able to take that and use it in various ways. You know, as in pancakes, as an example.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, you can. The fine sorghum can be used to make pancakes. So, yeah,
Girl, I'm visiting your kitchen.
yes, do come. Yeah. So, yeah, let's start by embracing the foods that we grew up eating, regardless of which culture you are belonging to or come from.
It's quite hard introducing new things and new varieties to preschoolers.
True.
How do you then start introducing new things, variety, and incorporating some of our cultural food into the everyday diet, and just experimenting with them?
That's the key, experiment. So firstly, you know, there's research done that with certain age groups, with the younger kids, you may have to give a child a specific food to a child up to 12 times before they actually accept it.
True.
Okay.
So number one is let's make it normal. It's not an event, it is a regular food. Number two, let's have that food with the child. Sometimes it is Timmy's mealtime and it's not the family mealtime. They get bored. You know, there I am, they've given me this thing. I don't even know what I'm supposed to do with it and no one else is eating it other than me. Is it mine only? Like, what's happening? So let's sit down and enjoy it with the kids. The other thing about food is that as much as it nourishes, it is so much a part of development. So the textures, the using your hands, and it's I embrace it. Other people are like, no, lend your fucking knife. No, that tactile experience. It's part of their development. They touch squishy food. They touch grains. They master the pincher grasp by eating those foods. So let it become just more than food that nourishes, but food that teaches you and it teaches the child as well. So imagine the taste of something fermented, giving that to a child and having them have that and enjoy it, and you enjoy it with them. So that's another way of making sure.
I think a lot of parents just struggle with the idea of a balance,
Yeah.
you know, and also kind of coaching your caregiver around, my child might just want bread today and bread and butter, but there needs to be a balance throughout the day of what they're eating. How do you coach your caregiver to be able to monitor, are they getting all the nutrition throughout whilst I'm not here or when I'm at work?
So in my home, we've got a staple that is definitely pap, because Auntie's from Lesotho and she believes in pap. He and my entire household does not necessarily like rice, but samp and pap are very much essentials in my home. However, my son cannot have a meal without the two. So even if I'm trying to introduce veggies and a portion of meat, he'd want his pap or he'd want his samp, or at least a slice of bread, mommy. Yeah, so with regards to you saying, like things like those kind of things, like our starches being staples, that is actually very true, because no matter how many times I try and trick him, he's not trickable. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I promise you.
So, I mean, if you have a situation like this and you do want to introduce a variety, where do you even start?
You know what? Children at a particular age, they like going everywhere with their mothers or their fathers.
Yeah.
So whoever they like going with, they can go involve them in the shopping. I think that's the one thing, the first step, involve them. Secondly, as mentioned, have the meals with them. Because if everybody's having the same meal, why should his meal be different? And I think another thing is, let's keep in mind, they're still growing. Children do go through a phase where their favorite blanket cannot, they cannot leave the house without their favorite blanket or pillow or teddy bear. They go through phases, so be patient with them.
So Lindiwe, as a dietitian, and you have a client like Ukeke, her child loves pap, loves Sam, loves his powdered drink. What advice would you give her on the kind of traditional foods to start incorporating into the diet, the kind of little things to start putting in so that there's more variety over time?
So she mentioned that, for example, her husband is Tswana speaking. So one of the things that one would need to find out is, between her and her husband, what kind of foods are they familiar with? Because it's good to start with something that people already know.
It's very difficult for him and I to have a balance in terms of what we agree on when it comes to food in the house, because he prefers to stick to what is his norm or what is his comfort, as opposed to me that wants to introduce the child to other narratives of my Soto culture, as like bomoroho,
So, I mean, this is great information, because now you know the child could be a picky eater too and take off the dad.
That could be, exactly.
That could be the issue. But let's give, for example, at some point, just like with any situation, you need to negotiate, right? You get to a point where, let's try this out. So, for example, it's about, again, moving away from the mind space of what you as a grown adult prefers and what is good for the child. So let's give an example of the sour fermented grains. We now know that, for example, the gut microbiota is our body's immune system. It's a big part of our body's immune system, and immunity is important for you as a mom, and it's important for the dad. So one thing we can agree on is what is best for the child, and we know that fermented foods are very good in establishing a good gut microbiome.
Mine loves his fermented dogo.
So those kind of things is literally how you would bring in certain foods, because you will agree on what you need for your child, and what you know, and also get away from, this is what I don't like, because it's no longer about you. It's about also generationally, because we really don't want to lose out on these benefits of foods that
That have carried on through generations.
yes, that our grandparents
definitely.
have used,
Yeah.
our great grandparents have used. And even now, there's just so much on the spotlight around all of these things that we call them ancient grains now. It sounds very sophisticated, but it's really what we've grown up eating.
Yeah.
So I think, and the thing with nutrition is that it's not nutrition counseling is not a once-off conversation.
Yeah.
It's a discussion that you have on a regular basis, and this is where we left off the last time. This is what we tried. This is what worked. This is what didn't work. You come back a month later. What progress has been made? So there's a give and take. What have you tried? Here's some recipes for you to try that you may not have thought of.
True.
And in that way, you are going to slowly bring about those kind of foods into your family.
There's so many beautiful points that have been made in this conversation. Nutritional foundation does start with culture. And culture doesn't have to be nutrition versus culture. Culture and nutrition can work hand in hand. But there's so many other things that we need to pay attention to. It's our behaviors as well.
Behavior.
And also, how are mummy's eating habits? How are dad's eating habits in the home? How are we incorporating certain eating habits and nutrition into how the caregiver is providing for the child? Where the child goes for school holidays. It's not that Ugogo has a terrible eating plan at home or a less nutritious one. It's the variety that we need to then have conversations about maybe. It's the allowing things to be done the way they've always been done sometimes. The thing is fine, every day even. But let's see how we can incorporate more variety. Have I summed up what you've said?
100%.
And work with a dietitian.
Right?
Work with a dietitian.
Thank you to my amazing guests for sharing their insights with us today on culture and diet. We really hope that our viewers have found this episode helpful and informative. Now remember to like and subscribe our channel and engage us on social media at Art of Superwoman. I'm always keen to hear what's on your mind, so please take a look at the contact info in the show notes and send through those questions and even topic suggestions so that we can stay connected. Our hashtag is #TheGrowingParent, so also share your comments and views and any tips that you might have pertaining to today's discussion. And if you are listening on the podcast right now, do stay until the end of the podcast, where we will share this week's resources, reads, blogs, places to go. You do not want to miss this segment.